If they saw us now, the hero trying to remember and the monster looking to forget, the old gods would howl in fury. Good. Behind these eyes. Chapter 1. The Final Gaze. Ironically, my story began at its ending. It was ancient Greece, the 14th century BC, though such mortal measurements of time meant nothing to me then. The air inside my crumbling, shadow-drenched temple was thick with the copper stench of my own blood and the suffocating musk of my serpentine scales. The final moments of my battle with Perseus were not playing out like the triumphant, glorious songs the bards would one day sing. It was a brutal, desperate, and agonizing dance of survival. Despite the arsenal of divine gifts the so-called hero had at his disposal, I had not made it easy for him. The gods had cursed me, yes, but in their cruelty, they had forged a terrifyingly powerful apex predator. My lower half, a massive muscular coil of shimmering emerald and obsidian viper scales, made me impossibly fast. I flowed like dark, violent water over the cracked marble floors. My scaly body acted as an impenetrable armor, deflecting the glancing blows of his blade. But my greatest advantage was my crown. The writhing, hissing nest of vipers that sprouted from my scalp gave me full spatial awareness. I had no blind spots. Every flicker of heat, every vibration in the air, every microscopic shift in the damp temple atmosphere was relayed to my brain in a chaotic, brilliant symphony of sensory input. I was hunting him. He had thought his helm of darkness, granting him invisibility, would be his ultimate trump card. He was a fool. The helm hid his physical form from mortal eyes, but to me, he was a blazing beacon. I could smell the cold sweat of his terror, the salt of the Aegean Sea clinging to his tunic, the metallic tang of his divine weaponry. I could hear the frantic, rabbit-like thudding of his heart echoing against the stone pillars. Much like in the myths that would later distort the truth of that day, he was using his polished bronze shield as a mirror. He was walking backwards, stumbling over debris, desperately avoiding looking directly into my face. He knew the curse. One look into my eyes that poets had once compared to the clear summer sky, and his flesh would calcify, turning him into yet another tragic statue in my garden of the damned. My vipers hissed in unison, tasting the air. There, I tracked him effortlessly. I heard the sharp scrape of his leather sandal against a loose pebble. Knowing he'd been spotted, he removed his helmet, making himself visible again. He was inviting my attack. It was a desperate, suicidal gamble, but my fury overrode whatever caution I had left. The millennia of isolation, the betrayal of Athena, the brutal violation by Poseidon, it all boiled up into a blinding, suffocating rage. I lunged. My massive serpentine tail coiled like a spring, launching me forward with the force of a battering ram. I soared through the damp air, my claws extended, ready to tear the arrogant boy to shreds from behind. But at the very last moment, as I descended upon him, I caught a glimpse of the polished bronze shield he held up in defense. I saw myself. For a fraction of a second, the world seemed to stop. The reflection was distorted by the curve of the metal, but the horror of it was undeniable. I saw the monstrous, gaping maw filled with venomous fangs. I saw the terrifying, unblinking glare of my own cursed eyes. I saw the writhing, chaotic mass of serpents that had replaced my beautiful, pink-golden hair. In that infinitesimal pause, my predatory focus shattered. A wave of profound, crushing sorrow washed over me, heavier than the ocean that had birthed my tormentor. Is this what I am? I thought, the realization hitting me harder than any physical blow. What is the point of continuing this? What is the point of a cursed, lonely life, forever a monster in the dark? I stopped fighting. just for a heartbeat. I let my guard drop. But a heartbeat was all Perseus needed. With a roar of panicked exertion, the invisible hero swung harp, the adamantine sickle sword given to him by Hermes. The blade cut through the damp air, singing a deadly, high-pitched note. The pain was a brief, blinding flash of white-hot agony, separating my consciousness from my coil. The last thing I recalled before dying was the terrifying sensation of weightlessness. I felt my head separate from my body, and then everything turned dark, suffocatingly dark, as I was unceremoniously shoved into his divine kibisis sack. Then there was only the void. Chapter 2. The Awakening. The void ended with a beep. It was a steady, rhythmic, electronic beep that made absolutely no sense to a mind forged in antiquity. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't. A heavy, thick fabric bound my vision, wrapped tightly around my head. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. For a terrifying, disorienting moment, I thought I was still just a severed head, rotting away inside Perseus's dark sack. Then I felt it. The rise and fall of my own chest, the steady thrum of a heartbeat vibrating within a rib cage. I inhaled sharply, my lungs expanding, pulling in air that smelled strange, clean, sterile, completely devoid of the damp earth and salt I was accustomed to. I twitched my fingers. They brushed against a soft, woven material. Sheets. I moved my arms. They felt heavy, sluggish, but they were there. Carefully, tremblingly, I brought a hand up to my face. Skin. Smooth, warm, human skin. I traced my jawline, my cheeks, the bridge of my nose. There were no scales. I reached higher, feeling the top of my head. Instead of the thick, writhing, scaly bodies of my sisters, my fingers tangled in strands of fine, soft hair. Human. I was human. I gasped, a ragged, desperate sound, and tried to sit up. The unseen world spun dizzily around me. I threw my legs over the edge of whatever elevated surface I was lying on. My feet, bare and soft, touched a smooth, incredibly cold floor. "Wait!" a voice called out, but I didn't listen. I pushed myself off the bed, intending to run, to flee this incomprehensible dark place. But the moment I put my weight on my legs, they folded underneath me like wet clay. I had human legs, two distinct separate limbs, but they possessed no strength, no muscle memory. They were entirely foreign to me. I had slithered for thousands of years. I had forgotten how to walk. I crashed to the hard floor with a pained cry. Instantly, the steady beeping transformed into a frantic, high-pitched alarm. The sound was piercing, entirely alien, and utterly terrifying. Heavy footsteps pounded against the floor, rushing into the room. I scrambled backward on my elbows, my breath coming in panicked, shallow gasps. I reached up, my fingers clawing frantically at the blindfold. I needed to see. I needed to know who was coming to kill me now. No, 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 don't do that. Please, stop. A pair of strong, warm hands grasped my wrists. The grip was firm but surprisingly gentle, halting my frantic tearing at the fabric. I thrashed, crying out, expecting the cold bite of a sword to follow. "It's okay. You're safe. Please, calm down. Let me help you," the voice said. It was a man's voice, deep, resonant, and laced with an urgent, soothing quality. "Who are you? What is this place? Where is the sack?" I screamed, my voice hoarse and raspy from millennia of disuse. "You're not in the sack anymore," the man said softly. His hands moved to support my back and shoulders. He lifted me with astonishing ease, pulling me up from the cold floor and gently depositing me back onto the soft bed. "My name is Clay Magos." You are in a hospital of sorts. My private facility. You are safe. I shrank back against the pillows, pulling my knees to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Why can't I see? Take this off me. I can't do that yet, Clay said, the medical alarm abruptly silenced, likely shut off by a press of a button. The sudden quiet was heavy and oppressive. Listen to me very carefully. You have your body back. You are human again, mostly, but the curse, it still lingers in your eyes. If you take that blindfold off and look at me, or the medical staff outside that door, you will turn us all to stone. I froze. The air left my lungs. The curse. The agonizing, isolating curse. Athena's final lingering spite. How? I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a profound, trembling exhaustion. How is this possible? I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor, followed by the rustle of clothing as Clay sat down beside my bed. It took a very long time, Clay began, his voice calm, steadying my frazzled nerves. I am an archaeologist and a sculptor. I found your remains, your head. It was locked away in a forgotten, subterranean vault deep in Persia. It had been stolen from Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars millennia ago and buried beneath the sands, lost to history. I squeezed my eyes shut beneath the blindfold, the memory of the dark sack threatening to swallow me again. I brought you out, Clay continued. I gathered elements intrinsically linked to your mythos. I traveled to the island where you once lived and gathered the soil. I procured specific strains of serpent blood, fragments of ancient Aegean coral reefs. I used them, along with the soil, to sculpt a new body for you, a vessel. I listened, my mind struggling to grasp the impossibility of his words. Magic. It sounded like the magic of the gods, the very beings who had destroyed me. I connected your head to the vessel, Clay said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, carrying a weight of awe and exhaustion. And through a process that blended ancient alchemy with modern science, you woke up. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would you do that? I am a monster. You were made into a monster against your will, Clay corrected me gently. And you have human legs again, but they have not been used in over 3,000 years. You need physical therapy to remember how to use them. Until then, you are safe here, I promise you. I sat in the darkness, the heavy fabric pressing against my eyes. I was alive. I was human, but I was still blind, still cursed, and completely at the mercy of a strange man in an era I did not understand. Chapter 3. Reflections in the Dark. The next day, the sterile scent of the medical room vanished, replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of jasmine and green tea. The bustling sounds of doctors and nurses had ceased entirely. The medical staff has been dismissed, Clay's voice announced from the doorway. They were necessary for your initial stabilization, but it's too dangerous to have sighted people around you. I have arranged for specialized care. I sat up, my back against the plush headboard. I could hear the soft, synchronized rustle of silk approaching my bed.
Lady Medusa,
A sweet, melodic voice chimed.
we are here to serve you.
A second voice, identical in tone and pitch, echoed immediately after. This is Shin Shin and Yi Yi, Clay explained. They will be your personal attendants. They will help you bathe, dress, and navigate the apartment until you are comfortable. And you may remove your blindfold. My hands shot up to the fabric, my fingers trembling. Are you sure? I asked, my voice laced with fear. If I look at them. They are completely blind, Clay said softly, by birth. They cannot see your eyes, and your curse requires visual contact to take effect. They are perfectly safe. I heard Clay's footsteps retreat, the heavy wooden door clicking shut behind him. I was alone with the twins. Slowly, agonizingly, I reached behind my head and untied the knot. The thick velvet fell away. I blinked against the sudden onslaught of light. The room was breathtaking. It wasn't a hospital ward, but a massive, sun-drenched bedroom suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline of impossible, towering structures of glass and steel piercing the clouds.
The mirror is to your left, my lady.
One of the twins, Shin, perhaps, said gently, holding out a delicate hand to guide me. I slid my legs off the bed. They helped me hobble toward a massive, ornate floor mirror standing in the corner. I braced myself, taking a deep, shuddering breath before lifting my gaze to the glass. A gasp escaped my lips. Staring back at me was a ghost from a forgotten age. From the neck up, I was exactly as I had been before Athena's wrath had descended upon me. My face was an ethereal, flawless oval. My eyes, the source of my devastating curse, were a breathtaking, pale cyan, the color of glacial ice under a winter sun, and my hair, it cascaded down my shoulders in thick, lustrous waves of pink golden silk. In ancient Greece, that unnatural, radiant hair color was the undeniable mark of my divine bloodline, a beauty so profound it had incited the jealousy of goddesses and the fatal lust of gods. But below my neck, things were different. The body Clay had sculpted for me was not the lithe, somewhat awkward frame of the teenager I had been when I was cursed. This body was mature. It was the body of a woman in her mid to late 20s. It was fuller, softer, yet possessed a statuesque, delicate grace that made my breath catch. My collarbones were sharply defined, my waist tapered flawlessly into gently flared hips. It was a body designed by an artist, an idealized vision of classical beauty, yet entirely human. I touched my own cheek, the glass reflecting the movement perfectly. He accounted for the time, I realized, a strange flutter in my chest. He gave me the body of the woman I should have grown up to be. I ran a hand down my smooth, unblemished thigh. It was beautiful, but it felt weak, disconnected. I looked at my reflection, a beautiful woman trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, still carrying the deadliest weapon in history behind my pale blue eyes. I assumed the beauty standards of this modern era must be astronomically demanding if Clay felt the need to craft a vessel this flawless. It made me feel simultaneously revered and deeply, uncomfortably objectified.
Is it to your liking, my lady?
Yi asked softly, sensing my stillness. I looked away from the mirror, my expression hardening. I had been beautiful once before, and it had brought me nothing but ruin. It is adequate, I replied coldly. Help me back to the bed. My legs ache. Chapter 4, The Skyscraper Sanctuary. Days bled into a routine defined by struggle and silence. The guest room I occupied was merely one fraction of a sprawling, opulent penthouse apartment perched atop an exclusive skyscraper in Hong Kong. Through the massive windows, I could see the entire city, a chaotic pulsing sea of neon lights, crawling metal chariots, and a harbor choked with massive ships. It was a world entirely alien to me, a world that had moved on, forgotten the gods, and built its own mountains of glass. Shin and Yi explained that the entire floor belonged to Clay Magos. He was a man of immense wealth and seemingly limitless resources. He was also my tormentor, in a way. Every afternoon, Clay arrived for my physical therapy. He was a tall man, 32 years old, with broad shoulders, dark, unkempt hair, and hands calloused from chiseling stone. He was patient, methodical, and incredibly gentle, but I hated every second of it. Push against my hands, Clay instructed. He was kneeling on a padded mat on the floor, holding my bare feet. I gritted my teeth, my brow slick with sweat. I pushed, my leg muscles trembling violently, burning with the effort of firing synapses that had been dormant for millennia. I was wearing a loose silk tunic and shorts, my eyes securely covered by a sleek, modern silk blindfold that Shinshin had fashioned for me. I offered him nothing but cold, polite compliance. I spoke only when spoken to, answering in clipped, monosyllabic tones. "You're doing very well," Clay said, his thumbs massaging the arch of my foot to ease a cramp. "The muscle tone is developing faster than I anticipated. The magic in the clay is accelerating the healing." I pulled my foot back sharply. "I am tired. We are done for today." Clay paused, his hands hovering in the empty air. He let out a slow, quiet breath. Of course. Sin will bring you some tea. Get some rest." As he walked away, I sat on the mat, massaging my own aching legs. I trusted no one, least of all a powerful man who claimed to want to help me. My history with powerful men, Poseidon, Perseus, was etched in trauma and blood. I assumed Clay wanted something from me. My beauty, my power. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Later that evening, while Shinshin brushed my golden pink hair, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. "Why do you serve him?" I asked, my voice quiet, in the sprawling bathroom. "He is a man. Men are inherently dangerous." Shinshin's brush paused. I sensed her stillness.
Mr. Magos is not like other men, my lady,
Shinshin said gently. She resumed brushing.
Yi and I, we were not always maids. We were born into a very dark world. A few years ago, we were slaves.
I turned my head toward her. "Slaves?"
To a Macau sex trade gang.
Shinshin whispered, her voice trembling slightly.
It was a nightmare. They used our blindness. They thought it made us compliant. For reasons we still do not fully understand, the leaders of our gang tried to have Mr. Magos assassinated. They failed.
Shinshin set the brush down, her hands clasping in front of her.
The very next day, the leaders of the gang mysteriously disappeared. Mr. Magos walked straight into their heavily guarded headquarters in Macau. He dismantled the entire operation. He didn't use guns, he just broke them apart. He freed over 50 girls that night. He gave us money, new identities. But many of us, including my sister and I, had nowhere to go. We asked to stay and work for him. He took us in.
I sat in silence, the weight of the story settling over me. My fear was still there, but for the first time, a hairline fracture appeared in the ice wall I had built around Clay Magos. Chapter 5. The mantra in the dark. My newfound humanity came with human frailties. Insomnia was the worst of them. My mind, accustomed to the hypervigilance of a monster who slept with one eye open for centuries, refused to shut down in the quiet luxury of the penthouse. One particularly stifling night, unable to endure tossing and turning any longer, I tied my blindfold securely into place and wandered out of my suite. I navigated the apartment by touch and sound, my bare feet making no noise on the plush carpets. My hearing, while no longer enhanced by a head of vipers, was still remarkably sharp. As I drifted down a long hallway, I caught a sound. A low, rhythmic muttering. I followed it, pressing my back against the cool wall, inching toward an open doorway. It was Clay's bedroom. I strained my ears to listen. He was talking to himself. His voice was strained, breathless, laced with a quiet, desperate panic. "My name is Clay Magos," the words tumbling over each other in a frantic loop. "I am 32 years old. I live in Hong Kong. I like sculpture. I like the sight of landscapes. I like the smell of petrichor. I hate loud noises. I hate reggaeton music. I hate Indian food. My name is Clay Magos. I am 32 years old. I frowned beneath my blindfold. It was a litany, a mantra. He was reciting his own personal information over and over again, as if clinging to a lifeline in a turbulent sea. He sounded utterly terrified, as if he were fighting a war inside his own head just to remember who he was. I stood there for a long time, listening to the powerful man reduce himself to a frightened boy reciting facts in the dark. A strange pang of empathy twisted in my chest. He was haunted by something just as I was. The next morning, a spark of my ancient, petty spite returned. It was a defense mechanism, a way to regain control when I felt vulnerable. As I sat in the living area, waiting for Shin to bring my breakfast, I decided to investigate his strange mantra. Shin, I called out, "What is reggaeton music?"
It is a very rhythmic, loud style of music, my lady,
the maid replied.
Very popular in certain parts of the world. Why do you ask?
Find some, I commanded. I want to play it loudly during my physical therapy session today. I wanted to annoy him. I wanted to crack his unflappable patience, to prove that his gentle demeanor was an act. Shin hesitated but complied, using a voice command to cue up a playlist on the apartment's state-of-the-art sound system. A heavy, synthesized drum beat blasted through the room, accompanied by aggressive, rapid-fire vocals in a language I didn't recognize. The bass vibrated in my chest, jarring and unpleasant. It lacked the melody of the lyre, the poetry of the ancient choruses. It was chaotic, abrasive noise. After exactly 30 seconds, I rubbed my temples, a headache blooming behind my eyes. "Turn it off," I snapped. "By the gods, turn it off!" The music died instantly. I sighed, slouching into the sofa. I had wanted to punish him, but I had ended up punishing myself. In a strange, twisted way, I realized Clay Magos and I shared the exact same distaste. It was a tiny, insignificant detail, but it made him feel annoyingly more human to me. Chapter 6. The Blood of Perseus. The breaking point arrived 3 days later. The physical therapy session was brutal. Clay was pushing me harder, forcing me to support my own body weight on a set of parallel bars. My muscles were screaming, sweat soaking through my tunic. My legs felt like lead, shaking uncontrollably. "One more step," Clay encouraged. He was standing close behind me, his hands hovering near my waist to catch me if I fell. "Just one more, Medusa. You have it." "I cannot," I gasped, my knuckles white as I gripped the bars. "You can. Push through the burn," he urged, his voice firm. Something inside me snapped. The pain, the exhaustion, the utter humiliation of being weak and dependent on a man, it all boiled over. I let go of the bars and collapsed. Clay caught me instantly, his arms wrapping securely around my waist, lowering me gently to the mat. I scrambled away from him. "Why?" I screamed, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. I was panting, tears of frustration hot on my cheeks. "Why are you doing this? Why bring me back? Why endure the cost, the time, the effort? What do you want from me?" Clay remained kneeling on the mat, his breathing heavy. "I told you, I want to help you. Men do not help without a price." I spat, my hands curling into fists. "Tell me the truth. Why me?" A long, heavy silence filled the room. When Clay finally spoke, his voice was hollow, stripped of its usual warmth. "Because I am plagued," he said quietly. "Every night, when I close my eyes, I am not Clay Magos. I am a monster wearing a hero's skin. I dream of blood on a bronze shield. I dream of severing a woman's head, then stuffing it in a bag like a trophy. I dream of the screaming, the darkness, the rot. I froze, my heart stopping in my chest. I am trying to undo the errors of ancient history, Clay continued, his voice thick with self-loathing. Errors that have been celebrated for millennia. I am trying to clear the ledger of my ancestor. Your ancestor? I whispered, a cold dread seeping into my bones. My bloodline traces back to Argos, Clay said. I am a direct descendant of Perseus. The name hit me like a physical blow. Perseus, the butcher, the thief, the man who had ended my life and turned my head into a weapon. Before rational thought could intervene, centuries of buried trauma and blind, feral panic seized control of my body. With a primal shriek, I lunged at him. My fangs and claws were gone, but I had the pure, unadulterated fury of a cornered animal. I aimed for his throat, intending to tear it out with my bare hands. But Clay was not a soft, modern man. He was trained, fast, and incredibly strong. As I collided with him, he shifted his weight, using my own momentum against me. In one fluid, expert motion, he twisted me around and pinned me against the smooth glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. His forearm pressed against my collarbone, holding me firmly in place. His other hand gripped both of my wrists above my head. Our faces were mere inches apart. The sudden, violent restraint triggered an explosive flashback. The cold marble floors of Athena's temple, the crushing weight of a massive body pressing me down, the smell of brine and sea foam. The cruel, mocking laugh of Poseidon as he tore my robes, ignoring my pleas, ignoring my tears. I froze. The fight completely drained out of me, replaced by a paralyzing, icy terror. I stopped breathing. I squeezed my eyes shut so tight it hurt, whimpering pitifully, expecting the violation, expecting the pain. Medusa, Clay said. His voice dropped an octave, losing all aggression. Medusa, stop, breathe. I expected him to tighten his grip, to press closer, but none came to happen. You no longer have your monster powers, Clay said softly, rationally, trying to break through my panic. Attacking a fully grown man is not a good idea, but I am not going to hurt you. Do you hear me? I am not him. In one swift, deliberate motion, Clay let go of my wrists and reached up. His fingers grazed my temples, and he removed the blindfold from my face entirely. Look at me, he commanded softly. I gasped, a sound of pure horror. No, you'll die. You'll turn to stone. Look at me. I opened my eyes. The pale cyan light of my curse flared, a deadly, petrifying energy surging from my gaze straight into Clay's face. I waited for his skin to turn gray, for his eyes to harden into marble, for the life to drain out of him. Nothing happened. Clay stared back at me, his dark eyes unflinching. He was breathing steadily. His skin remained warm and flushed. How? I choked out, my knees going weak. It seems my cursed bloodline has one benefit. I am immune to your petrification. You cannot hurt me, Medusa. And I will never hurt you. I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time without the barrier of the blindfold. I expected to see the arrogant, triumphant smirk of Perseus. Instead, I saw a man who looked utterly exhausted. His eyes were deeply sad, carrying a heavy, depressive weight that made him look older than his years. With the adrenaline suddenly leaving my system, my unpracticed legs finally gave out. I crumpled toward the floor. Clay was there in a flash. He caught me before my knees hit the mat, scooping me up into his arms as effortlessly as if I were made of air. He carried me down the hall, his chest warm and solid against my cheek, and laid me gently on my bed. He pulled the duvet over my shivering form. He turned to leave. His shoulders slumped. "Wait!" I croaked, reaching out. My fingers grazed his forearm, weakly gripping his sleeve. He stopped, looking down at me. "You haven't actually explained it," I said, my voice shaking. "Why go this far? Why bring me back just to clear a ledger?" Clay sighed, looking out the window at the glittering city lights. "Because I want out," he said, his voice ragged. "Every time I have those dreams, I forget who I am. I wake up thinking I am in ancient Greece. I forget my name. I forget what era I'm in. The memories of Perseus are overriding my own. I have to drink myself into a stupor just to get a dreamless night, or I have to sit in the dark and mutter my own personal information like a madman just to ground myself in reality." He looked back at me, his dark eyes pleading for understanding. "I am losing my mind, Medusa. I hoped that by undoing his greatest sin, by giving you your life back, the gods or fate or whatever curse runs in my blood would be appeased. I just want the dreams to stop. I want a life where I am simply Clay Magos and nothing more." He gently pulled his arm from my grasp and walked out of the room, leaving me staring after him, my heart aching for the grandson of my murderer. Chapter 7. The Emerald Gaze. Time passed differently after that night. The ice between us, it had shattered. My physical therapy progressed with astonishing speed. I found myself actively trying, pushing my limits, eager to impress him. Clay was no longer just my captor or my doctor. He was a fellow prisoner of fate. With every bit of physical contact, his hand steadying my waist, his fingers correcting my posture, my arm draped over his shoulders for balance, a quiet, crackling energy grew between us. I realized I was no longer flinching when he touched me. Instead, I found myself anticipating the warmth of his skin. I was falling for the descendant of my killer. It was absurd, it was terrifying, and it was undeniable. One afternoon, a month after my awakening, I was walking unassisted across the living room, my stride fluid and graceful. Clay watched me from the sofa, a rare, genuine smile playing on his lips. "You're ready for the final step," Clay announced. Standing up, he walked over to a sleek glass coffee table and picked up a digital tablet. "The final step?" I asked, turning to face him. "I've figured out how to suppress the curse," Clay said. "I can't cure the magic in your gaze, but I can contain it. Have you ever heard of the Emperor Nero?" "A Roman? Yes. Long after my time," I replied. "He was known to watch gladiatorial games through emerald lenses to protect his eyes from the glare," Clay explained. "But mythologists believe the original emerald sunglasses he possessed were forged with mystic properties, capable of dampening magical optics. They suppress curses. And you know where they are? They are the centerpiece of an exclusive, highly illegal underground auction happening next week," Clay said, his tone turning serious. "In Greece." My breath caught. Greece, the land of my birth, the land of my death. "We are going together," Clay said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You will wear a heavy veil, but when we get those shades, you will finally be free to look at the world without fear." 3 days later, we were stepping out of a private jet onto the tarmac in Athens. The air was warm, smelling faintly of the sea and dry earth. Even through my heavy, opaque morning veil, I felt a profound, emotional jolt. I was home. The auction was held in a sprawling, heavily guarded subterranean compound carved into a cliffside overlooking the Aegean. It was a gathering of billionaires, crime lords, and black market antiquities dealers. Clay, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, guided me through the opulent crowd. I wore an elegant, flowing black gown, and my thick veil. "Keep your head down," Clay murmured into my ear, his hand resting protectively at the small of my back. "There are dangerous people here." As if summoned by his words, a man detached himself from the crowd and blocked our path. Clay Magos, a slick, overly confident voice purred. "I never thought I'd see you show your face in the Mediterranean again." I stiffened. Through the thin mesh of my veil, I observed the man. He was striking, in a predatory sort of way. He had slicked back dark hair, a sharp beard, and wore a garish white suit. But it was his aura that repulsed me. He radiated an arrogant, suffocating entitlement. Everything about him, the way he looked at me, the swagger in his stance, even his name, as Clay hissed it under his breath, screamed, "Danger!" "Reynaldo de la Mar," Clay said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "De la Mar, King of the Sea." The translation echoed in my mind. A wave of nausea washed over me. He even looked a bit like Poseidon. "You stole from me, Magos," Reynaldo sneered, taking a step closer. "That vault in Persia belonged to me. I had the map. You just got there first and took the grand prize." I realized then the magnitude of what Clay had done. He'd done more than just finding my head. He had stolen it from a powerful, dangerous billionaire. He had risked his life long before he even resurrected me. "It didn't belong to you, Reynaldo," Clay said, his body tensing, stepping slightly in front of me to shield me. "It belonged to history." "Don't give me that self-righteous academic garbage," Reynaldo scoffed. He leaned to the side, trying to get a better look at me through my veil. "Is this why you survived the hit I put on you in Macau? You dismantled my sex ring just to show off for your new pet?" My blood ran cold. He was the one who had tried to kill Clay. He was the monster who had enslaved Shin Shin and Yi Yi. Reynaldo smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "I hear she's a masterpiece, Clay. A perfect reconstruction. I tell you what, I'm a forgiving man. Sell her to me. Name your price. I've always wanted a living statue for my private collection." Clay's hands balled into fists. He took a menacing step forward, ready to strike the billionaire right there in the middle of the gala, but I moved faster. I stepped in front of Clay, placing a gentle, restraining hand on his chest. "Do not ruin your life for this insect," I thought. I turned to Reynaldo, reaching out from beneath my veil. I brushed my hand against his lapel. As I did, I subtly slipped a small, folded piece of paper, a napkin I had snagged from a tray earlier, into his breast pocket. "Mr. de la Mar is a very busy man, Clay," I said smoothly, my voice a sultry, hypnotic purr that I hadn't used in millennia. "Let us not waste his time." Reynaldo's eyes widened slightly at my touch and my tone. He grinned, assuming he had already charmed me. "Smart girl. I'll see you around, Magos." He swaggered away. Clay looked down at me, furious and confused. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Fixing a problem," I whispered. "Win the auction, Clay. Get the shades. I will handle the King of the Sea." Chapter 8. The Stone Garden. The note had specified the estate's sprawling, isolated sculpture garden at midnight. Reynaldo de la Mar arrived exactly on time, a smug, victorious grin plastered on his face. He walked past marble statues of nymphs and satyrs, the gravel crunching beneath his expensive shoes. He assumed the beautiful, mysterious woman in black had recognized his superior wealth and power, ready to defect from the brooding archaeologist. I stood at the far end of the garden, bathed in the pale light of a full moon. I had removed the heavy mourning veil. In its place, I wore my simple silk blindfold. The sea breeze whipped my pink golden hair around my shoulders like a halo of spun fire. You are even more breathtaking in the moonlight, my dear, Reynaldo said, stepping into the clearing. He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with raw, unfiltered lust. Magos is a fool to hide you away. I felt a profound, absolute calm. I was no longer a victim. I was the predator. I can give you everything, Reynaldo boasted, stopping a few feet away from me. He reached out, his fingers grazing my bare shoulder. Palaces, jewels. You will be the crown jewel of my collection. You will serve only me. The touch of his hand, the entitlement in his voice, it mirrored Poseidon so perfectly it was almost poetic. But this time, I was not in a temple, and I was not helpless. I serve no one, I whispered. With a swift, fluid motion, I reached up and tore the blindfold from my face. I opened my eyes, fixing my icy cyan gaze directly upon him. Reynaldo gasped, a sound of profound shock. For a split second he stared into my eyes, mesmerized by their unnatural glowing beauty. Then the curse took hold. It was fast, brutal, and entirely silent. The color drained from his face, replaced by a sickly, ashen gray. The smirk froze on his lips. The lust in his eyes crystallized into dull, unseeing spheres of granite. The transformation cascaded down his body, turning his expensive suit, his skin, his very blood into solid, unyielding stone. Within 3 seconds, Reynaldo de la Mar was nothing more than a statue, a monument to his own arrogance and greed, blending perfectly into the garden of nymphs and satyrs. I stood before him, my chest heaving slightly. I felt no remorse. I felt only a deep, profound sense of closure. I had killed the man who tried to murder Clay. I had avenged Shin Shin and Yi Yi. And I had finally struck back at the archetype of the men who had ruined me. I heard footsteps running down the gravel path. I quickly tied the blindfold back over my eyes. Medusa! Clay burst into the clearing, panting, clutching a sleek black velvet box in his hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes falling on the new statue in the garden. He looked from the stone face of Reynaldo de la Mar to me. I told you, I said calmly. I handled him. Clay stared at the statue for a long moment. Then, slowly, a heavy, relieved sigh escaped his lips. I thought he'd reprimand me, that he'd look at me with fear. Instead, he simply walked up to me, opened the velvet box, and pulled out a pair of dark, intricately carved emerald sunglasses. Turn around, he said softly. I turned. He gently untied my blindfold, letting it fall to the grass. Before I could open my eyes, he slid the emerald shades onto my face. The frames were cool metal, the lenses thick and heavy. Open them, he whispered. I opened my eyes. The world was tinted a rich, vibrant green. I looked at Clay. He was standing right in front of me, looking back. It's hard to put into words, but my body could sense it. I could feel the curse radiating from my eyes, trying to reach Clay despite of his resistance. I could feel it fruitlessly hitting the emerald surface, bouncing back onto my face, and finally fading away, like exhaling onto a face cover. It was weird, but it wasn't bothersome. I knew I could get used to the sensation before long. It worked. From this point onward, I could look at another human being without the fear of destroying them. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling over the bottom rims of the emerald lenses. Clay smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from my cheek. Let's go see the world. Chapter 9, The Empty Cage. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of color and light. With the emerald shades firmly in place, I was reborn. Clay took me on a private tour of modern Greece. We walked through the ruins of the Acropolis, and I traced the ancient stones with my fingertips, mourning the past, but marveling at the present. We ate fresh olives and feta at a seaside taverna, the taste exploding on my tongue. We laughed, truly laughed. When we returned to Hong Kong, he took me to the peak of Victoria Mountain, showing me the city skyline I had only ever seen from my window. He bought me street food, taking joy in watching me experience the chaotic, vibrant life of the modern era. I felt alive, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I loved him. I loved his kindness, his strength, his tortured soul. I was ready to tell him. But when we returned to the penthouse apartment, the air felt different. Heavy, empty. Clay had gone to his study to handle some paperwork. I went to my room to change out of my travel clothes. When I emerged into the living room, Clay was nowhere to be found. Instead, Shinshin and Yi Yi were standing by the coffee table, their faces somber. Shinshin held out a thick, cream-colored envelope.
Mr. Magos asked us to give this to you, my lady,
Shinshin said quietly. I took the envelope, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I tore it open. Medusa, if you are reading this, I am already gone. The transfer papers are on the desk. This apartment, the bank accounts attached to it, everything, it is all yours now. You have enough wealth to live 100 lifetimes in absolute luxury. You will never lack for anything. I have seen the way you flinch when men look at you. I know the traumas you carry, the horrors inflicted upon you by gods and kings. I brought you back into this world, but I refuse to be another man who cages you, even if that cage is made of gold. You are free, Medusa, truly free. You depend on no one. You need fear no one. You have your sight, your life, and your independence. Build a life for yourself. Find happiness. As for me, the dreams, they are getting worse. Seeing Greece again triggered something. I cannot let my madness endanger you. I am going away to a place where I cannot hurt anyone when my mind finally breaks. Do not look for me. Just live. Yours in penance, Clay. I dropped the letter, the paper fluttering to the floor. He had left me. He had given me the world, and then walked away from it because he thought he was protecting me, because he thought I needed to be free of him. He's an idiot, I whispered, my voice cracking. I didn't want the apartment, nor the money. I wanted the man who had pulled me from the dark. I looked at Shinshin and Yi Yi. Pack a bag, I commanded, my voice hardening with ancient resolve. Chapter 10. The Anchor. It took 3 weeks and several $1 million in private investigators to find him. He had retreated to the edge of the world. The helicopter landed on a bleak, wind-swept ridge in the remote highlands of Ireland. The air was biting cold, smelling of peat bogs and rain. I, bundled in a thick cashmere coat, my emerald shades shielding my eyes from the weak sun, hiked up the muddy path toward a small, isolated stone cabin. I pushed the heavy wooden door open without knocking. The cabin was freezing. The fire in the hearth had died down to embers, and sitting in a worn armchair by the window, staring blankly out at the setting sun, was Clay. He looked terrible. He was unshaven, gaunt. Dark, bruised bags hung under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month, completely consumed by exhaustion and madness. He slowly turned his head as I entered. He blinked, staring at me as if I were a mirage. "Medusa?" he rasped, his voice weak. Am I dreaming again?" I walked over to him, pulling off my gloves. I knelt beside his chair and took his cold, calloused hands in mine. "You are an absolute fool, Clay Magos," I said fiercely, though tears pricked my eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he mumbled, trying to pull his hands away, but he was too weak. "I don't know who I am anymore. Last night, I thought I was in the Gorgon's lair. I thought I had the sickle." "You are Clay," I said firmly, squeezing his hands. "You are an archaeologist. You like the smell of petrichor. You hate reggaeton music. with good reason, by the way. And you are the man I love. He stared at me, the words struggling to penetrate the fog in his mind. I am not a victim who needs to be hidden away for her own protection. I continued, my voice unwavering. I am Medusa. I have survived gods and monsters, and I am not going to let you be destroyed by your own mind. I stood up, pulling him gently to his feet. He swayed, completely drained. I wrapped my arm around his waist, supporting his weight, and guided him toward the small bed in the corner of the room. I'm tired, he whispered brokenly, like a frightened child. I'm so tired of fighting him. Then stop fighting, I said softly. I helped him lie down on the mattress, pulling the thick woolen blankets over him. I will fight him for you. I kicked off my boots, took off my coat, and climbed into the bed beside him. I left my emerald shades on the nightstand. I curled my body against his, resting my head on his chest, directly over his heart. I draped my arm across his torso, holding him tight. Sleep, Clay, I whispered into the darkness. I am here. I am your anchor. If you dream of the past, I will pull you back to the present. You are safe. He let out a long, shuddering sigh, his arms instinctively coming up to wrap around me. Within minutes, the exhaustion claimed him, and he fell into a deep, heavy sleep. I stayed awake for a long time, listening to his breathing. A few times during the night, he twitched, letting out a distressed whimper as the ancient memories tried to claw their way to the surface. But every time, I tightened my grip, whispering his name, reminding him of who he was and where he was. And every time, he settled down. When the gray light of dawn finally crept through the window, I was awakened by a strange shifting beneath me. I opened my eyes, blinking sleepily. Clay was awake, looking down at me. The bruised, haunted look in his eyes was gone. He looked rested. He looked like himself. How do you feel? I asked softly, pushing myself up slightly. Clay stared at the ceiling for a moment, a look of profound wonder crossing his face. Quiet, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My mind is quiet. There were no dreams, just you. He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that warmed the freezing cabin. But then, his brow furrowed, and he winced slightly. Although, he added, a hint of amusement in his voice, I am currently experiencing a different kind of paralysis. I panicked, my heart leaping into my throat. I scrambled back. The curse? Did the immunity wear off? Are you turning to stone? Clay let out a sudden, booming laugh. It was a beautiful sound. No, Medusa. You fell asleep with your head directly on my bicep, and you put all of your weight on it. You cut off my circulation. I can't feel my arm. It's completely dead. I stared at him, my panic evaporating, replaced by a flush of hot, embarrassed color rising in my cheeks. He was joking. He was actually joking. Ugh, you idiot! I cried out, playfully punching him in the chest. Clay laughed harder, his good arm pulling me back down against him. I couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up from my own chest, joining his. We lay there in the freezing Irish cabin, tangled in blankets, laughing until our sides ached. Epilogue. We stayed in the Irish cabin for 3 weeks. Every night, we slept wrapped in each other's arms. My presence acted as a flawless tether to reality. With me acting as his anchor, Clay's mind finally began to heal. The intrusive thoughts of ancient Greece faded away, replaced by the warmth of my skin and the sound of my steady heartbeat. The nightmares stopped entirely. When we finally packed our bags to leave, Clay looked healthier, happier, and completely free of the ghosts of his ancestry. We returned to Hong Kong together, The penthouse apartment felt different when we walked through the doors. It was no longer a gilded cage, it was a home. Shin Shin and Yi Yi greeted us with bright smiles, having already prepared a feast to welcome us back. Later that evening, as the city lights twinkled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, I stood on the balcony, the warm breeze ruffling my pink golden hair. I was wearing my emerald shades, watching the boats navigate the harbor. I felt Clay's arms wrap around my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "What are you looking at?" he asked softly, kissing the side of my neck. "The future," I replied, leaning back against his solid chest. I placed my hands over his, lacing our fingers together. "It looks beautiful." And behind the emerald lenses, my pale cyan eyes, once the bringers of death and despair, reflected nothing but the vibrant, pulsing light of a long-awaited life. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.